Sunny Mehta was not able to acquire Barrett Hayton, and we're going to look at some backup options on what could help the Devils forward core as a whole, plus Nico Hischier being a true hero both on and off the ice. All that and more on this edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast. And a pleasant good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, Devils fans. What is going on? As always, it is your host, your best friend, your confidant, and your number one source, Neil Villapiano, and welcome to another edition of the Devil's State of Mind podcast right here on the Hockey Podcast Network, as well as SportsWire Radio, the best place to get everything you need to know about your still retooling New Jersey Devils. And as always, Devils fans, hope you're having a fantastic day wherever you're checking out this podcast episode. And as always, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to check this episode out. Greatly appreciate it. This is my second episode in my new place. If you watched the last episode or even listened to it, first and foremost, thank you so much. And number two, you will have noticed that I moved up to Syracuse, New York, as I just finished up my first week in my broadcast and digital journalism master's program at SI Newhouse here at Syracuse University. Like I said, I'm going to be continuing to give you guys the best Devils content I can while also balancing with my classes. So I do appreciate your guys' understanding, your patience, and as always, your support. Really quickly here before we get into this episode, you already know that we got to give a special shout out to our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook right down below here. And what's really exciting is that DraftKings has announced that you can now use it in all 50 states here in the United States of America, and that is phenomenal news. And I'm really glad that DraftKings is able to do this, and they continue to give out new offers to new customers like yourself. If you haven't got in on all the huge cash prizes, again, all you got to do to get in on it is to sign up with our promo code THPN. Once you sign up, again, that's promo code THPN. And as always, thank you to our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook. With so much going on, especially we are getting close, very close to the World Cup final. We got the MLB All-Star Game and All-Star Week coming up in just a couple of days. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. This is the perfect opportunity to get in on all the huge cash prizes. So again, sign up with our promo code THPN when you sign up at DraftKings.com. And as always, Devils fans, make sure to bet responsibly. Okay, so not a whole lot of news to share, except the biggest one that we obviously know about is the official update when it comes to Barrett Hayton. Again, if we remember, the Sunny Mehta on the same day as the beginning of free agency threw out an offer sheet to Barrett Hayton, who at the time was a restricted free agent, on a one-year deal at $4.775 million. Now, we'll get into that in a little bit more and talk about ultimately what ended up happening with that. Plus, we had a bunch to talk to, including talking about a really heartwarming story of our captain, Nico Hischier, being a true hero off the ice. So, as always, you guys already know, we have a lot to get to here on the Devil's State of Mind podcast. So let's not waste any more time and get rolling. And we will get rolling and drop the puck with talking again about Barrett Hayton. And when I did my episode earlier this week, we had talked about that we were just a couple of days away from the deadline that the Utah Mammoth had to ultimately match the offer sheet that the Devils threw out to Barrett Hayton. I think a lot of us, including myself for sure, were hoping ultimately that the Devils would be able to get him. But over on, I believe it was Wednesday, this past Wednesday, we did get the news that Bill Armstrong and the Utah Mammoth had agreed to match the one-year offer sheet that the Devils threw out to Barrett Hayton. So Hayton will remain with the Utah Mammoth at least for this upcoming year. The Devils, no harm, no foul. They don't lose anything, and they continue to keep the salary cap that they have right now, which is a little over $7 million. And for those of you, again, that just want to know, it is a 1-year deal at $4.775 million. The other thing I found interesting about it was that now that Hayton has officially signed with Utah is that because of the ruling with the offer sheet and that Utah matched it, they are actually not allowed to trade him. So even though he's on a 1-year deal and expiring contract, and if Utah's having a rough year and they decide to be sellers at the deadline, Hayton is one of the guys that cannot be moved. So Hayton, for better or for worse, is a Utah Mammoth for the next season. And so the Devils will ultimately have to, if they still want to try to get Hayton, will have to wait until the 2027 offseason. So I would have been, I will say this, I was a little bit disappointed, not terribly surprised, because a lot of these offer sheets that we see teams normally match whatever another team threw them an offer sheet, fans, especially during the off season. But this was unfortunately not meant to be. And again, also, if the Devils ultimately had acquired Hayton, they would have had to surrender a 2027 second round pick. Not a huge loss either way, but would have been nice to add in. He would have been a really, really big help on the center depth, especially in the bottom six. But now Sunny Mehta is going to ultimately have to pivot here as he continues to try to retool this team. Should also mention in NHL news, another team in the Metropolitan Division was not successful in getting their offer sheet ultimately through, as Leo Carlson ended up getting his offer sheet matched by the Anaheim Ducks for $18 million a year. So he will remain with the Anaheim Ducks. For the same thing with the Flyers, no harm, no foul. But the Devils and Flyers kind of throwing those out there, making the offseason, especially in this time right now, a little bit more exciting, interesting to talk about. But now what will make things interesting is to look ahead to some potential options that the Devils could look at, particularly in the free agency the free agency class that's still available right now, as other guys that could ultimately come in and potentially help improve this Devils team, especially when it comes to scoring. Now, I'm not going to do this in any sort of specific order. And again, to clarify, this is just free agents. There is obviously the trade market, especially now with Anaheim getting Carlson back. You think about some guys over there like Chris Kreider, maybe Troy Terry as well, maybe Frank Vetrano, who knows? Those guys could become potential cap casualties. And there's other names out there that we have talked about before that Sunny Mehta could also go after. We don't know ultimately what Sunny Mehta is looking to do, what he's in the process of doing, and ultimately what he ends up accomplishing before we get into training camp. And one last thing I will say here before we get into some options here is simply this, that I know that a lot of people are crapping on Sunny Mehta even now because they see a lot of the other teams, particularly in the Metropolitan Division, making some pretty significant moves. And meanwhile, the Devils still feel like a roster that is one Jack Hughes injury away from having their season end. I get it. I get the frustration. But ultimately, I will mention, it's July 10th, guys. It's July 10th. We do not know ultimately what this Devils roster is going to look like by the time we get to even the beginning of training camp. So ultimately, we will have to wait and see. We have to give Sunny Mehta a full offseason here. We got to give him a chance to see what else he can do. Once we get to training camp, if things are still not fully in the way that we would like, then yeah, he will definitely be allowed to be criticized. But I think right now we have to give him more time. It is the early part. We are only into like the second week of July. So we really do have to see ultimately what Sunny Mehta's got cooking up, if he has anything else going on. So I know that this word is going to be a little bit taboo for Devils fans, especially in this day and age, but we have to go on the side of patience right now. And let's just see ultimately what Sunny Mehta does. And one of these guys that I'm going to mention as backup options, especially in the free agency market that the Devils could go after, could be something that ultimately Sunny Mehta is working on and gets done. And so let's dive right into that. And let's go to our first option here, and that is former Pittsburgh Penguins right winger Anthony Mehta. Now, in this past season, 25-26 for the Penguins, he had a really, really impressive year, especially after the year before when he was in Calgary dealing with injuries and not really able to ultimately stay consistent. He comes to Pittsburgh and has himself a really good year. Missed all of one game, played in 81 games this past year, 33 goals, 31 assists for 64 points, which is really, really impressive. And a guy right away that you could look at and say, wow, like a veteran kind of winger who also is not afraid to be physical and be a pest, which is, I'm sure, something a lot of Devils fans would certainly welcome to bringing to New Jersey. And if he could put up a similar production, that's going to help this Devils offense immensely here. Now, AFP Analytics, which does a great job, by the way, of doing contract projections. I've used them a bunch in several episodes over the course of time. Their current contract projection for him is 4 years at $6.35 million per year. Now, I will say this, that especially in the new age NHL where contracts are getting up and up and up and the salary cap is going up and up and up, 6.35 million per year is going to seem less and less of a big deal. The reason that I would be on the side of caution if Mantha is looking for a longer term deal like that is that he is 31 years of age. And once you get into your 30s, you really start to wonder how many more years does a certain player ultimately have to play at a very high to even potentially elite level. And there are certainly exceptions to this. With Mantha having dealt with several injuries in his career, especially in his late 20s, you kind of wonder if this was, he was playing this well because it was his walk year, right? And then he goes to another team, whatever it is, somebody grossly overpays him or whatever, and then he falls off, and then he ends up being just a major cap issue. And with the Devils having just over $7 million right now, I don't know if Sunny Mehta would ultimately look to try to do this. Now, if we're talking about a 1-year deal, maybe at less, maybe somewhere in the 3 million, 4 million, then I could probably be more convinced to do so. And I also will say that I feel that Sunny Mehta is also not done moving money around either. So it's possible that the Devils could end up with more salary cap space later on. But right now, again, they have just over $7 million without doing anything else. But the bottom line is this for me. I would be welcoming of Anthony Mantha if the Devils get him on a 1 or 2 year deal. If they throw him a 3-4 year deal, I would immediately start to be like, that's a risk that I wouldn't normally do, and I wouldn't do. And just kind of, again, going off of just the way that Sunny Mehta has gone about business, I don't think he ultimately would do that. Maybe he looks to try to get a 1 or 2 year deal, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But that's only one option. But that was the first one that I know several people have talked about. Another one here that could be a guy that could come in, 1 year, be a really good veteran presence, a guy who's going to be a future Hockey Hall of Famer and arguably the greatest American-born player ever, and that is Patrick Kane. Now, I know a lot of people have said before when it comes to Patrick Kane that A, he's old, right? He's 37 years of age currently. 2, you think about Jack Hughes, and Jack Hughes says that his favorite player growing up was Patrick Kane. So if you think about it, if those two guys are playing similarly, would they really play well off of one another? And number 3, and I think this is a pretty obvious one, is that where are the Devils even in terms of his interest? Because he's certainly going to have some suitors. Do I think he ends up back in Detroit? I think that ship has sailed. I think that ship has ultimately sailed. And I think that Patrick Kane, in my opinion, is going to sign with either the Chicago Blackhawks and go back for like a swan song. And they need offense, especially with Connor Bedard being out for the next couple of months. They do need help. They need, especially also to try to convince Bedard to sign long term. Or he goes back home. He's from Rochester, but he goes back home and plays for the hometown Buffalo Sabres, who are certainly on the rise. And that would be, I think, a really, really awesome story for a Sabres team that is coming off of, making it deep into the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs this year and finally getting back into the playoffs. And that would be really cool. That would be really cool. But let's say that maybe Patrick Kane and the Devils have some mutual interests. What would Patrick Kane ultimately bring in? Last year in 25-26 with the Detroit Red Wings in 67 games played, 16 goals, 41 assists for 57 points. In terms of that goal to assist ratio, again, very similar to um, what Jack Hughes kind of does with his kind of play. But I think that the potential of those two guys playing together with their styles, I think could be for some pretty exciting hockey. And I know a lot of the knock on Patrick Kane, other than being old, is the fact that he's more of just an all offense kind of guy. And I'll be very honest with you. I think the Devils need to be looking for at least one or two guys that are like that. I think that we have way too many passengers on this team, guys who are looking to pass first all the time, and we need guys who have a nose for the goal. And Patrick Kane is certainly that way. AFP Analytics projects his contract to be a 1-year deal at $3.2656 million. So really, I'd say probably closer to $3.27 million. Again, the Devils, if they signed him to a deal like that, they'd still have, just under $4 million to work with on other moves. And again, this is all without doing anything else and moving other money. But I think honestly, it would be kind of a very intriguing kind of opportunity for Patrick Kane to come and play with a guy with one, again, you're talking about Patrick Kane being the greatest American born player in history, playing with a guy who was an American hero and a guy that maybe could become one of, if not the greatest American born player when his career is all said and done. He's got a lot of work to do, obviously, to match up with Patty Kane, but for Jack Hughes to have a chance to play with his idol, I think could be a lot of fun and also could be very productive as well. Again, these are also talking about low risk, low cost, high reward potentially guys that I think Sunny Mehta can certainly look at when it comes to the free agency market. So Patrick Kane is definitely, I think, an option. And until he signs with somebody, he will remain an option that we will certainly talk about. Another Patrick that we must talk about, and I've talked about him before, and we're going to talk about him again, is Patrick Laine, which Laine is the most intriguing when it comes to low cost because of the fact that he is only 28 years of age and he has already had a ton of goal scoring in his career. I'm not going to bring up his stats from last year because he played in just 5 games because most of the year he was injured. And even when he got back from being injured, he just remained a healthy scratch for the Canadiens on their run to the conference finals this past year. I will give you his career stats up until this point. So again, keep in mind, he's only 28, 537 games played, 224 goals, 198 assists for 422 points. Pretty darn good for a guy who's only 28 years of age. A big knock on him is going to be that he might be injury prone. He's dealt with several injuries in the last couple of years. And for the Devils, he would fit right in with obviously all the injury bad luck that we have. But I think a lot of people would be maybe not as excited about it. But if he could even get to, either close or maybe even on the level that he was a couple of years ago and really, find his redemption, this is a guy that can score 30-ish goals for this team. And that would be phenomenal. And I know another thing that people will throw at me on social media and everything like that is Laine is all offense, no defense. Same thing I will say that I said about with Patrick Kane is that, again, the Devils need more guys that are nose for the goal kind of guys. And I think that in, looking at that could be exactly what the Devils could be looking for here, again, with a low cost, high reward kind of guy. And I'll tell you this, when you look at AYP's analytics contract projection, he's projected to get a 1-year deal at the league minimum of $850,000. I mean, look, if you could sign him to that, that is phenomenal because even if he struggles and doesn't do well, the Devils could move him, cut him, and it wouldn't cost them very much. That's honestly the way that I think that any team is going to ultimately go about it when it comes to bringing him in. And he's a name at his age and his ability and what he's been able to bring in the past, I think is something that is going to intrigue people. And I think it should absolutely intrigue the New Jersey Devils as another option here. The next guy is more on the older side. He's about the same age. I believe he is about the same age. He's a couple of years younger than Patrick Kane, but still, approaching his mid-30s, and that is Vladimir Tarasenko. Tarasenko is not going to be back with the Minnesota Wild. It seems like I don't really know exactly what happened with that, but it sounds like that both sides are really not interested in continuing, and it seems like it didn't end particularly well. Tarasenko is coming off a pretty productive year in Minnesota in 75 games played, 23 goals, 24 assists for 47 points. That's pretty good for a guy at his age being 34. And so a guy that certainly is not in the prime of his career, but if he's still being able to produce 20 to 25 goals, even still playing on a top six line with a guy like Jack Hughes and or Nico Hischier, I think that's a gamble. I think that's a good gamble to make ultimately here. AYP Analytics contract projection is a 1-year deal at $3.3904 million. So a little over $3 million for 1 year. Again, it's a 1-year deal. It's $3 million is not that bad considering, again, the Devils have just over 7 million right now. I wouldn't be against it. I know he's older and he may not be able to stay with the pace. But if you think about a guy like Tyler Toffoli that the Devils had a couple of years ago, who a lot of people said, couldn't keep up with playing with guys like Jack Hughes, Tyler Toffoli was on pace to score 30 goals overall with the Devils if he didn't get traded. So I really think that point is moot. Like, I don't think that point is relevant to this kind of conversation. Ultimately, I think he's a guy that can still find the back of the net at a pretty decent consistency. So another older veteran kind of player whose great elite years are certainly past him, but it doesn't mean he still can't come in as a veteran presence on a 1-year deal and be productive in helping this Devils offense take another major level that they certainly need to get to. And my last option here is a name that is not as well known as the other 4 guys that I mentioned, and that is Eeli Tolvanen, who most recently has played with the Seattle Kraken. In 25-26 with Seattle, he played in 78 games, 12 goals, 24 assists for 26 points. I know that's not really that interesting, but if the Devils want to look for more of just improving the depth of this team and maybe not necessarily looking exactly at top 6 scoring in the free agency market, Tolvanen could be a pretty decent bottom 6 player. He's really known for being kind of an all-around kind of guy. He's not great at anything, but he's pretty good at a lot of different things. He is a really good checking third line kind of guy who could play both on the left and right side, has been able to produce 20 goals in his career in the past, not too long ago. 12 goals is still 12 goals, however you want to look at it. And he's not going to come at like a super big deal. A lot of projections, including AYP's projection, is 2 years at 3.667. So maybe 3.67 million per year. For a guy that would be on our bottom 6, at best, maybe top 9. I don't know if I would necessarily go to that level in terms of a 2-year deal, but certainly a guy that if the Devils could bring him in is a guy that could bring speed, bring some of that physicality that we always love and constantly like to talk about, and can be a pretty solid bottom 6 player. Again, you're looking for not only help on the top 6, but to certainly improve the bottom 6 and the depth, something that Tom Fitzgerald really struggled at doing. And I think that that's something that is in the back of Sunny Mehta's mind. So those are 5 free agency options. There's a lot of other names out there, but these are the 5 guys that really stood out to me. And again, also the Devils could certainly go the way of the trade market as well. So again, there's still a lot of time and a lot of different options here when it comes to Sunny Mehta trying to retool this team, especially after not being able to ultimately sign Barrett Hayton to that 1-year deal. Now, let's shift to some heartwarming news that we got on Thursday. So this came around Thursday morning. This is when the story came out. Amanda Stein was the first one here with the Devils to kind of report the story. It was great to see. It was great to read because of just the selfless acts that our captain Nico Hischier was able to do. So It came out originally on a website called 20 Minuten, which I'm sure translates to 20 minutes. It's a newspaper, online newspaper in Switzerland, and it says that New Jersey Devils captain Nico Hischier, who's from Switzerland, helped a family while boating. And so, according to this report, a family of four was boating in Bern, Switzerland on Saturday when their inflatable watercraft got into trouble near the Enghold Wire, which is a hydroelectric dam and pedestrian footbridge on the R River. And again, this was all reported by 20 Minuten. Hischier was on the scene with a couple of his friends and assisted the Burns authorities in the rescue effort. And in the end, the family was safe and unharmed. And again, I know that originally it sounded like the report was that like Hischier went out and like tried to he swim out there and help, but ultimately he helped alert authorities and helped in any way else he could to ultimately make sure that family was safe. And that's still phenomenal. And it's a story that has gone around the last 24 hours. It was on TMZ for some reason. It was on People Magazine as well. I mean, this isn't a this isn't a hockey story. This is a heartwarming story. And this just, again, shows the selflessness and the leadership that Nico Hischier brings as a person every single day. And I absolutely love it. It just warms my heart to see that Hischier continues to be the great person that he is. Ray Shero, the late great Ray Shero, knew exactly what he was doing when he drafted this young man who is now the face of this franchise, signed for another 5 years as of last week. And it's just great to see him continue to be that way. And that's our captain, man. Really, really love it. And really, really love that he continues to represent himself and the Devils so well, both on and off the ice. And I'm really glad to hear that the family who was in trouble was able to be safe and enjoy the rest of their time with what they were doing. And good job by Nico Hischier to be, on the spot there. Nothing wrong with a little bit of luck, but good job to be on the spot there and find a way to help in any way that he could. And on that note, guys, that's going to do it for this quicker episode of the Devil State of Mind podcast. As always, thank you guys so very much for taking time to check this episode out. If you're here on YouTube, make sure to leave a like on this video. Subscribe if you haven't already. Tell all your friends to do the same. Thank you to the bunch of new subscribers we got over the last couple of days. We're up to 217. Again, trying to get to 250 by the beginning of training camp. So we are 33 subscribers away. So continue to like, subscribe, and share with family and friends to do the same. You can also check out the podcast wherever you get your audio listening platform, wherever you get your audio podcasts on all those platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, all that good stuff. And as always, guys, if you're on Apple or Spotify, make sure to do me a favor and leave a 5-star rating on either of those. It helps grow the podcast and get it out to more Devils fans like yourself. If you want to check out more Devils State of Mind and Devils content, follow us on social media, Devils State of Mind on Facebook, Devils State of Mind on Instagram, and Devils State over on Twitter. You can follow all the podcasts and Devils content on my BlueSky as well. It's just my name, Neil Villapiano. And you can also follow me over on TikTok. Again, it's just my name, Neil Villapiano. So Neil.Villapiano over on there. And also check out all my content over on Pucks and Pitchforks. I'll have some new stuff coming out very, very soon over there. And check out Pucks and Pitchforks overall. We do a great job of getting you guys the Devils content that you want and that you find really, really interesting. But thank you guys so much for checking out this episode of the Devil State of Mind podcast, and we will see you in the next episode. Everyone continue to be the awesome people that you are. And you already know, as I say at the end of every episode, you got to put those horns up, baby, and say those words. Let's go, Devils.